Hi, today we're going to talk about masking fluid. I've got a couple of varieties of masking fluid here. We've got the Masquepen and also we've got two varieties of the Jackson's masking fluid. First of all, I'll show you the Masquepen. Basically, it's really easy to use. It's got a nib on it, so you take the lid off and you've got a metal spike that goes into the nib, stops it from clogging, which is really useful. The nib itself is slightly angled, so you've got a point, and that is going to be the point that touches the paper and allows you to get really fine lines. I'll just show you here. Give it a little squeeze to begin with, just to show the masking fluid coming out of the nib, and then you drag the Masquepen across the paper and you get a nice, relatively uniform line. You don't need to squeeze the bottle too much because otherwise you'll get lots of blobs coming out. So you just drag it over the surface and the masking fluid will come out. You must remember that masking fluid must always be applied to completely dry paper, because otherwise the masking fluid will sink into the fibres of the paper and it'll be really difficult to remove. So always make sure that whatever you're working on is completely dry before you start using it. Put the lid on as soon as you've stopped using the masking fluid, because it's quite fast drying and you don't want it to clog up unnecessarily. I'll show you now the masking fluid in Jackson's. The Jackson's brand masking fluid is available in blue and white just because the blue is easier to see, so it might be easier to use. However, if you're using particularly soft paper, or you're using the masking fluid and having to leave it on for a considerable amount of time, it might leave a trace of the blue pigment, which is not what you want, so that's why we do it in white as well as blue. I just show you the application with a brush. Make sure your brush is completely dry for the same reason. If you've got a wet brush, then the latex will be diluted and it will sink into the paper. Another little useful tip is if you coat the hairs of your brush in washing up liquid or soap, you just form a sufficient coating so that you can just rinse the masking fluid straight off the brush and it won't cause you any difficulties. So I've got a little bit on my brush, and obviously you can use a larger brush if you want bigger areas covered, but I'm just using a fine brush because I'm painting leaves and painting the veins of leaves. So I want it fairly fine, and as you can see it's just as easy to use as if you were painting with watercolour. And always remember that masking fluid is very fast drying, so always keep your lid on and rinse your brushes as soon as you can. You can also use a double-ended blender. This is a double-ended blender. It's a rubber-tipped tool that is often used for blending colouring pencils or pastels, but we're going to use it to apply our masking fluid, and you just have to very simply dip the double-ended blender into the masking fluid and then you form your lines like so. Finally, I'll show you the ruling pen. The ruling pen is often used by draftsmen with ink, but we're going to use it for masking fluid. It's basically a pen with two metal spokes, and you can adjust the gap in between the two spokes with the cog on the side, like so. And we have it relatively thin, and all you need to do is you get your ruling pen and dip it into the masking fluid. Just sort of scrape off the excess masking fluid on either side of the pen. Give it a little tap on your paper and then drag it very lightly across your paper, and you'll find that you've formed some really nice lines. And obviously you just dip it in when you need some more, and it's a really nice tool to actually work with. We'll leave those to dry. I've got some more shapes on the other side of the paper here that I made earlier, and these are completely dry. So what I'll do now is just show you what it's like to apply colour over the top of them. So I want these to be green leaves, so I wet my brush, got some green from my St Petersburg watercolour set, And we're just going to apply some colour over the top of the leaves. And as you can see, the masking fluid is resisting the paint, so you can still see where you've got your lines coming through. Let's have another green there. Right, and now you have to leave that to dry before you remove the masking fluid. So that's what we'll do there. I've got another example that I did a bit earlier, where I made some leaf shapes and I've put a little wash of cobalt blue over the top, and now we're going to remove it, and you'll see that the white of the paper will come through where the masking fluid has masked off that area of paper. You can remove masking fluid with anything really. You can use your finger, a putty eraser. You can also use the masking fluid itself. If you find a little dried up piece either in the thread of the jar, you can roll it into a ball and you can actually sort of coax the masking fluid off the sheet of paper, and it just gets it to come off a little bit to begin with, which is quite useful. With the double-ended blender, you've got a little bit of an angle here, so you can just coax it off with that, or you can use an eraser, and it's just a case of just very gently taking the masking fluid off. If you've got very, very thin paper, it might cause it to rip, so you've got to be really careful. And we suggest that you use masking fluid with 140-pound weight paper and a block ideally, because blocks just stop paper from wrinkling. And then you've got your lovely leaf shape, and you can work over the top of that, and you can apply more masking fluid if you so desire. But the white of the paper comes through, and it really forms quite a sharp, crisp white marks on your work. The end.